Good morning, and welcome to Sunday Story Hour, where we share real-life stories of how human design has helped our guests know themselves on a deep, transformative level. By knowing and trusting ourselves, we develop deeper, more honest relationships and unlock our true gifts. I'm Kathy Bashanko, and my guest this week is Katie Irvine, and she is a 2-4 emotional manifestor, right angle cross a rulership. Some of you might know her as Sort of Spiritual, which is what she goes by on Instagram, where she hangs out most of the time, right? So welcome, Katie.
Thanks for having me, Kathy. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm so excited for you to share your story because I just think you're kind of like I think of it as almost the eat, pray, love of human design, right? Like, you know?
Fair enough.
So I'm really hoping that we're going to get into all of it, and you can just tell us about where you were at in life and when you found human design and all of that good stuff, what happened. So just however you care to start, I'll let you initiate that.
Yeah, sure. So I'll start at the beginning of where I found human design. So this was six and a half years ago now. So getting close to that 7-year mark, not quite there yet, but I was at the time living in California. I was married. I was very unhappy with my marriage. I was very miserable in sort of every aspect of my life. And I had started working for a business coach, and she was doing a retreat at the Ritz in Paris. It was very fancy. And this coach that she had hired did human design for everybody. And there was probably like 10 women that were at the retreat. And I was the one working there,
Mm-hmm.
And it was interesting because it makes out statistic wise that I was the only manifestor in the room. But the woman who was doing the readings for everybody shared a little bit about manifestors as well. And it felt really confusing to me at first because all of this stuff that she was sharing about manifestors and how sort of powerful we are and how we're here to initiate and make an impact. And I was like, well, if that's the case, why am I the assistant, getting paid $20 an hour at the back of the room, and all these other women have 6 and 7-figure businesses, but I'm supposed to be like the powerful one? Now, listen, obviously I'm oversimplifying. That was just my understanding of manifestors and human design at my very first glance of it. But there was just something about it that really caught my attention. And I feel like learning about manifestors kind of spoke to some part of me that I think I had really buried deep inside. I think I'm a little unique in the sense that I was raised in a family of projectors. So my mom and my dad and my brother are all projectors. And so I really grew up with a lot of like, Kate, you can't just do that. You can't just do that. You can't just do that, which is the exact opposite of what manifestors are supposed to be doing, right? And so I was really, really conditioned, and I was a massive people pleaser, and I had really been living my life for everybody else up until that point. And there was just something about learning about being a manifestor that really, like I said, spoke to some part of me that I didn't even think I recognized at the time. But I feel like human design itself just kept calling me, like, there's something here for you. There's something here for you. Like, keep digging. And for those of you who have been in human design for a while, know that, 6-7 years ago, it was a very different landscape in human design than it is now. And finding information and finding good resources for human design is not the same. There's not, 10,000 Instagram pages and podcasts and YouTube channels. There was really very few resources. But I persisted. It just kept calling me back and calling me back. And that also happened during my Saturn return, which was a pretty big change in my life. I ended up, not because of human design, but just timing wise, I ended up leaving my husband and getting a divorce 2 weeks after I found human design, and moving from California back to Canada and Toronto. And I ended up not too long after that quitting my job and taking a new job. And it was really kind of stripping my life completely down. And one of the things I realized as well that I always tell my clients, so I don't mean to offend anybody, but it takes one to know one, is that manifestors are liars. And not because we want to lie, but because we just want to do what we want to do. And we're tired of people stopping us. And so they're not malicious liars, but they're just going to not fully tell the truth if they feel like they're going to be stopped or if they feel like they're going to be questioned. And so I was really out of integrity in my life. And given that I'm across a rulership and the gate 26 is in my earth, integrity is something I should really be grounded in. And I wasn't at the time. So that was a massive part of kind of reinstating integrity and coming clean with all the lies that I had shared with people, and nothing that was, awful, let's say, but I had just really hidden a lot of things because I learned that it was a lot easier for me to just do what I wanted to do. So, not informing anybody because I didn't know that was a thing. I still don't love informing, to be honest, but that's life. The manifestor strategy is for other people, I think, more so than it is for us.
Well, when I had Adrienne Roach on from Manifestors, she said that she had heard or believes that Ra made the informing part up just to give you guys a strategy, because the informing is for other people. It's not for you.
Yeah. And what I really believe the manifestor strategy is, it's to wait for the urge, to wait for that creative urge. And I wish that traditional human design talked a little bit more about that, because to her point, yeah, the informing piece, in a way, it helps us. It helps to clear resistance, but I don't necessarily care about the resistance. Like, I can just go and do my thing. And if it bothers you, I'm not trying to offend people or bother people, but that's just not really my concern. Right. Yeah. And so I think it's interesting because I think there's a massive misconception that like manifestors don't have to wait, that manifestors can just go do whatever they want to do. And it's like, no, we have to wait, but for the urge that just comes internally. It's different. Like, we still can't just have an idea and go out and make everything happen easily. It's like there's a very big distinction, I believe, between an urge and an idea. And so just like generators wait to respond, we also wait to respond in a way, but just to something internally.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. And so from there, I kind of destroyed my entire life, which needed to be destroyed. So I'm grateful that I did that, and slowly rebuilt it. And I remember I had really been trying to start a business that wasn't working for a while. And I remember one day when I was still kind of on the fence, let's say, with human design, I wasn't fully going into it, but it was a part of my life. It was something I studied a lot and paid a lot of attention to. But I remember just feeling so miserable one day, working as hard as I was working, trying to make things happen, and it wasn't happening. To think, okay, you know what? Let me just really give this human design thing a try. Like, in terms of my own life, let me just go all in with this as I understand it, with my strategy and with my authority, because this is pretty awful. And like, it can't get a lot worse. I mean, listen, I probably could have, but at the time, that's what it felt like. It's like, it felt like I didn't have anything to lose with really going in on this experiment. And so I did. And, this was, gosh, when was this? This was probably in 2018 or some point, that I decided to really go all in. And then I invested, in learning more human design and studying it. And I started doing readings for other people. And I think it's interesting. I sort of joke sometimes, being a 2-4 manifestor, that I'm like a fake manifestor, because I think the 2-4 profile is a very like trajectory profile, in the sense of being called out and getting like invitations for these areas of genius that you have. And so sort of immediately when I started doing human design, I got people through friends asking me like, oh my gosh, you do that? So can you do a reading for me? Can you do a reading for me? And it's like, oh, like I'm really new at this, but yeah, okay, sure. Like, I'm not going to charge you anything, but let me just try it out. And so the more I learned and started doing readings for people, then I really got a strong urge to start teaching human design. And this was in 2020, I believe, at this point. So I'd been in my own experiment for 2.5 years. And I was really like, no, I can't do this. It's too soon. This is wrong. But I was like, I said I was going all in on this experiment. So the urge is, and it was undeniable. And it lasted for months and months and months before I acted on it. But eventually it was like, okay, this is the urge. It's not going away. Let's just try and see what happens, And so I decided to, like, the program that I ended up creating that teaches human design, I launched it in August 2020. Yeah, August 2020. And I remember thinking, okay, if I get 5 students, I'll continue with the program. And if I don't get 5 students, I'll just refund everybody and it is what it is. And then 23 people ended up signing up with the first launch that I did. And so it was like, okay, there's perhaps really something to this, following your urges. no, I mean, it wasn't the first urge that I followed, but it certainly was the biggest one at the time. And so it's just kind of been going from there. And I've been following the urges in terms of, creating HD school and the travel that I do. And I like to travel. I like to move around quite a bit. And I'm so grateful that following my human design has given me the freedom to do that, to be able to have a business where I can work and move around, meet different people and explore different places. And so that's the nutshell story of my human design experience.
So the part that makes me think of you as the eat, pray, love thing is when you posted, was it last year early, where you're like, I'm going to Bali and I'm going to stay in each of these 3 places for, I don't know, X amount of shorter period of time. So I can decide which one I'm going to live in for the next long period. Was it a year or 6 months or?
I hadn't decided. Yeah.
Okay. And then you proceeded to post all these amazing pictures of you like in Bali doing all these really cool Bali things. And so Bali, I've had this thing for a while where I've been drawn to all these places that start with a B. Why? Bali, Belize. Those 2 specifically really stand out, but there are more that aren't coming to my head. But, I like, and I'm just like, oh, my bucket list is going to be a B list, So
I very much go to Bolivia as well. I don't know if that's on there.
Okay. Yeah, that would definitely be a place. And Budapest, I'd like to go to Budapest.
Oh, yeah. Cool.
Right. So I was having a little bit of like fangirl, like living vicariously through your Instagram. And then, but backing up, one of the things that really drew me to you was one, I'm a very visual person. So in traditional human design, my cognition is outer visions. Mm-hmm. So, and I spent a lot of my life like kind of feeling bad that it mattered to me how much, like what things looked like, what people looked like. And it's not that people had to be a certain kind of look. It was just, there was a thing about how people looked that I was either okay with or not. Like I could tell something about whether I trusted people or vibe people just by seeing them. Right.
Yeah.
So, I was always attracted to your color of green, even though my shades are a little bit brighter than yours. You're a little more emerald. I'm a little bit more, the brighter spring tones, but that green always, and the way you just always had this really polished aesthetic really spoke to me. But when you did that piece, and I'd like you to tell the story about the dress.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So I made this dress. It's, I was going through a rebrand, right? Because when I started my business, I did everything on my own. Like I built my website on Squarespace. I did all this stuff on Canva. And again, this was years ago when Canva wasn't as good as it is now. And I don't have design skills, but I did what I could, right? And so I was going through a rebrand. I hired this company to help me with the website and the branding and all this. And I think they did a pretty good job, but it was a bit of a rushed experience, especially for the photo shoot that we did, because we ended up sort of having, I think it was like 2.5 weeks maybe between the conceptualization of what the photo shoot was going to be and like my shopping list for all the things I needed to get and when the photo shoot was actually going to happen. So it's a bit of a mad dash to get all this shopping done, especially when you're getting very specific outfits, right? And so one of the dresses she had, she wanted this kind of like celestial looking dress that was actually a wedding dress. And I looked into ordering this. It was like a secondhand because you can't just last minute order a wedding dress. They take months, And I was trying to find it and I was like, okay, this isn't going to happen, but I really love the look of this. So like, what can I do? And I was like, I have to try to make it. Do I know how to make dresses? No. Do I know how to use a sewing machine? Somewhat. So I went to my mom's and I got her sewing machine from like the 1970s, right? From before I was born even. And I went to this fabric store that I'm actually staying just down the street from now. I went to this fabric store and I could not believe it because I walked into this store and the exact fabric, which was kind of a specific like sheer beaded like pearl fabric, was sitting right there, like draped over the board where they cut the fabric, And I was like, this is perfect. So anyways, I purchased the fabric. I made this dress. It was absolute chaos. Printing out like 300 sheets of paper for this pattern. And hammering the glass beads so I could sew it. My entire apartment was covered in shards of glass, literally, for months afterwards. Because, yeah, anyways, like I said, it was full of glass beads. And so you break them as you sew it. And anyway, but it was really cool because I ended up wearing this dress for the photo shoot. And then as this was all progressing, I ended up booking a last minute trip to Jordan for a conference. And they had a theme party for the closing night that was something involved of like, I don't know, like remembering your crown, or it was like some kind of like royal theme. And I was like, oh my gosh, I have to wear this dress. Mind you, again, I created this dress for a photo shoot. I don't know how to sew. It ended up being extremely heavy. And so it's like the seams were almost like ripping apart in some areas because it just like, I don't know how to make seams that like hold the weight of the fabric when it's such delicate fabric. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. And anyways, so I ended up, creating this beautiful dress, and it held together well enough for the photo shoot and for the party. So it worked out, but it's just fun. And it's like, I think that's partly a me thing. I think it's partly a manifestor thing where you have the opportunity to just like create and the delusion to just figure it out as you go. I also have a lot of line 3. So it's like I'm a 2-4 profile, but I have 8 third lines in my design. So a lot of it is like, let's just figure it out. We'll make a mistake. We'll get it wrong. And we'll rip out the seams. We'll resew it. Like it's all good.
Yeah, that's really fun too. And I would love if you can easily find it when we're all done here. If you could put a copy of the picture of the dress so people can have the visual, because that really bonded me to you. Like I was invested in that dress creation, and I just loved the story. And I think sometimes we underestimate the things that like make people get right. And so for me, that manifestation of this dress, that whole process you went through, your sharing of your process was really a cool thing. I have a daughter who's a 2-4 manifestor. She's splenic though. And her favorite time of the year is Halloween because, I mean, the girl makes these costumes and, you know, she's not a sewer. She's like hand sewing stuff and like glue gunning. And
hot gluing.
Like, right. But she's like, when it's all done, people are like, where did you get that? She's like, oh, I made this. I took a bra and I dyed it and I did this and I bought this fringe on Amazon. You know, all this stuff that she puts together and does all this stuff. And you're just like, wow. And I think that is very much, you know, we can all have creativity. I'm a very creative person, but that ability to just make it happen just feels very manifestor. And it's beautiful when it's in something that's such a fun representation. We tend to think of it as, you know, like manifesting your career and your, you know, all these big, almost heavy things, right? That we all think about. But, you know, that creative flow is really apparent in something like that. The other story I'd love for you to tell that is a little bit more whimsical is when you were in Bali. We talked a little bit about the hair flower ceremony.
Oh, the screaming.
And with the screaming and about, just the whole story of what that was and what that was like for you as a manifestor to go through that.
Yeah, it was a really interesting process. So I had asked a friend, I had a friend that was visiting, and she wanted to do some kind of Balinese ceremony. And, you know, they're very spiritual in Bali. And so there's lots of opportunities for that. And I had asked a different friend, who's also a manifestor, if she had any recommendations or if she knew any like priestesses, essentially, let's call them, that do ceremonies. And so she's like, yeah, actually I did this one. It was really interesting. And so I decided to book it. So I went there with a friend, and she does a reading for you. And the reading she did for me was actually really interesting. You know, she obviously she doesn't know my birthday. She doesn't know anything like that, but she kept talking about how my voice is very powerful and my voice is here to impact people. And I can't remember like the details of it all, but I just remember she kept saying that, which I thought was interesting, you know, given that I'm a manifestor and having the gate 12 twice. And it's like, that's kind of what manifestors are here to do, is to use their voice to impact people. Right. And whether it's, you know, using your voice in terms of speaking, it's like, that's just how the manifestation occurs in a way. And so I thought that was interesting. And then they give you these like sarongs and whatnot and take you to this area they have set up. Bali decorates everything with flowers. Like you can just buy baskets and baskets of flower petals there because they use them for all their ceremonies and their offerings and decorations. And so they, I don't know, had this area where you went and the Ibu, like the priestess, was like, they had these other two women that are around that were like chanting and singing and they pouring water on you. And I didn't know what was happening. She's like, just follow what I tell you to do, essentially. And so she was, like smacking me in the back and like holding my arms up open and like telling me to scream as like, like on the count of 3, like scream as loud as you can. And so I was screaming and crying and it was quite the spectacle, I'm sure. I mean, it was quite the spectacle. They offered to record it as well, which I thought was kind of funny, but I ended up posting a video of it on Instagram. And I remember as I posted it thinking like, this is the weirdest thing I've ever posted. Cause it's a video of me getting like flower water poured on me while someone's like smacking me in the back and I'm screaming and crying. Like it's a weird thing. And in the video I wrote about, or in the caption of the post, I wrote about this other time when I was in LA. And it was a couple months before I found human design. And I had taken some workout class in LA where it's called The Class by Taryn Toomey, if anyone's heard of it. It's an interesting one. But it's almost like a mix of a high intensity workout and like life coach training or something. Not training, but like a life coach session. And there's screaming involved in that too, and like banging on the floor. And at that point as an adult, I had never screamed. Like I couldn't tell you the last time I screamed when I was like 4 years old or something, probably. I just didn't really make that much noise. And that was a really interesting experience because I felt like once I screamed in that class, like that was to me realizing that like my marriage was over and I needed to get a divorce. Even though I didn't end up doing it for another few months, I felt like I screamed out all this frustration and anger and sadness that I couldn't pretend didn't exist now because like it was out there. And so in a way, I'm a big fan of screaming. If you haven't tried it recently, go grab a pillow and scream into it. I believe very, very much in that. But especially if you're a manifestor, get out that anger. But yeah, so I share about that because I think that was like another powerful time of like, yeah, just being able to release. I think it's really beautiful. And anyways, that video ended up getting quite a bit of attention from many different people. And I think it ended up having like 26 million views or something like that, which was very strange and attracted many people that didn't care about me or human design or, all of that and all the kind of weird hate that you get on the internet. But it was fine. It's, I think, it was definitely something that attracted a lot of people, but yeah, so it was a funny experience.
How did you feel after that experience though?
In what way? Like
after you had the experience of the combination of screaming and these beautiful flowers and this ceremony, and like that had to be. I would imagine it was very cathartic.
Yeah, yeah, it felt very peaceful.
Was it different than the other screaming incident? I mean, obviously the circumstances were very different, but the way that the type of release and the feeling you had afterwards
Yeah, I also think again, I'm such a different person now where it's like, I think, the 7 years ago scream or whatever it was, the first one was the beginning of such a transformation, where I was so uncomfortable. Like I said, where manifestors are liars, like we can lie to ourselves too, right? Mm-hmm. And so I really worked at not doing that. And by the way, I don't think aligned manifestors are liars, but I think when you don't know, I think it's really easy to go that direction. Manifesting generators too, by the way, not just manifestors. Anyways, I think I'm so much more comfortable with emotions and with release. And especially as a 1222 channel, like I have a lot of big feelings that come out of nowhere and just kind of knock you over, right? And so I think it was just like a really beautiful experience. And it reminded me how I, and probably others, but need to do that more to really give myself the opportunity because, I have a lifetime of experience of keeping emotions inside and not feeling things because they are so big and because I have so many feelings. It's like, I was joking when I first moved to Bali that like feeling my emotions was a full-time job. It was just, there was a lot going on. And in this similar sort of eat, pray, love vein of things, I met a South American lover, which in Bali, which was also there was a lot of emotions there. And so it can be difficult to really like let yourself feel everything all the time. It's like sometimes I just don't want to, and I just want to work and get stuff done. Like I don't have the time and energy to feel the things, but you also don't have the time and energy not to, in a sense. So yeah, I think it was just a really good reminder, and it was very cathartic, and it was such a good release. It felt very peaceful. And I think in a way that was like an initiation in a different relationship, I think, with myself and my emotions, and really giving myself space to feel that. And one of the things that was said in a reading as well, that I only feel things like, I only like express my feelings like, I don't know, I think she said like 20%. And she's like, you need to do like the full 100, like you can't just stop part way and be like, okay, I'm tired of crying or I'm tired of feeling this. Like, let's shut it down and move on. It's like, you got to see the whole process through, which I very much do believe.
Well, it's interesting too, because I noticed your the gate 12 on your throat, which is part of your manifesting channel.
Yeah.
Is in the third line both times.
Yeah.
So, there's a lot of trial and error. Plus that alone is a gate that has to be in the mood, right? So there's a certain amount of on and off just naturally. Then you've got the third line figuring it out, trial and error aspect of it. And you've got it in your Mercury, communication, and Venus, relationships and values. So I can see where all of that can add into the not wanting to be bothered to even tell the truth sometimes, right?
Yeah.
Or like I can see where all that is. So now I'm curious, I'd like to shift a little bit, because being a fourth line, a 2-4, okay, so the fourth line profile, obviously you know this, but I'm just explaining for people who are listening, really is meant to have be the stabilizer in the network, right? They have this network of people that they feel confident in order to be able to express your natural things that you're then called out by your network and that sort of thing. And so I'm wondering, going back almost 7 years ago to Katie, who was the assistant to this marketing woman, was she, you said? Or
business coach, yeah.
Business coach. So this assistant to the business coach in this nice little, world that you lived in, to then this manifestor who's, screaming while someone hits them on the back and dump. Like, how has that worked with your fourth line and your network?
I think, it was actually really interesting. I had dinner last night, Friday night, with a couple that I was friends with when I was married. And I haven't seen them in a long time. And it was just kind of an interesting experience, because it's like, oh, this brings up a lot of like the old Katie. And it's like the feelings of the person that I was back then, because I've always been, the fourth line, I would say, is one of the areas of my human design that I relate to the least. And I think because I still have some more aligning to do, I'm certainly not perfect yet, nor will I ever be. And I've always been a very one-on-one person when it comes to relationships. So I have a lot of close friends, but that are, one-on-one. And I kind of wonder as well if that's the fact that I don't have any penta gates activated in my design at all. So it's like, I just don't really like being in groups as much, but like I love one-on-one interactions. Larger groups are fine. That's different. But anyways, it's been an interesting journey. I definitely have, I have a few close friends that I've had since I was, a child. And then I've made some really wonderful friends through traveling and through Instagram and all of that. And so it's like, I have a lot of support, but I don't know that I use the fourth line to its fullest advantage. And I think sometimes as a manifestor, that can be tricky, because we have a bit of that like lone wolf quality of like, I don't want to bother anyone and I don't want anyone to bother me. And so I think I definitely have a lot of people in my life. I was doing an exercise at the beginning of the year, gratitude and looking back over the past year of everything that happened. And I was just like, wow, I really did meet a lot of wonderful people this year, and like people that I feel like really deeply connected to. Yeah. And yeah, like I said, I still think that the fourth line is an area that I can grow into and do a better job at networking. And I think part of that is having a lot of, I don't know, wounding in a way from when I was younger, when I was so off track and so unaligned. And, if you look at my chart, you'll see that I have the gate 10 4 times. And in both of my Saturns and in both of my Uranuses, which is a little bit tricky, right? So I had a lot of self-loathing and a lot of self-hate growing up, which made it then difficult to have relationships with people. I mean, I had them, but it's like I always thought that people hated me. And so there's still some growth for me in that area of like getting more comfortable with groups, of allowing my network to support me, actually expressing things to them. And I've definitely grown a lot over the years, but I'm curious to see how it will continue to unfold in terms of the fourth line. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's interesting now that you mentioned that, because I saw that you had the 810. I didn't look at your chart close enough to notice that many times, but it's on your otherwise open G center. That's your only gate, and it's a hanging gate. And obviously, since it's an open G. And so, I've mentioned my daughter is a 2-4 manifestor, and she also has an undefined G. And I think being a fourth line with an undefined G and being a manifestor, female, just really is an interesting conundrum, right? Because it's like, here you're meant to just kind of own who you are in this way, because you're impact, right?
Yeah.
But who you are is so variable. And in your case, the only constant is that you love yourself in all those situations, right? So, and then, taking that into everything that you do. And then, I remember reading something or hearing something where Ra talked about, for when a fourth line starts over somewhere new, it takes them 10 years to really build their power, because, obviously that's just a number, but like it takes a while. And I think about it. I have a niece who's a 2-4 manifesting generator. I forget. Anyway, I've got a lot of nieces. It's hard to remember it all, but she's 4 and she's a realtor. And whenever we've talked about things and she's thought about ever moving, she's like, it would take me so long, not even just her realtor business, like so much of her business and everything that happens to her comes through her network.
Yeah.
If she were to go start over anywhere, it would be like how, sure, she could have some people who could know people in those areas, but there's this whole starting over. And so I wonder if you felt that a lot when you went to Bali, but you said you met all these amazing people. So,
well, I mean, it's interesting because I've really never had that experience of being somewhere for that long. Like, I was in Toronto for university for 4 years. Then I moved to Korea for 1.5 years. Then I moved to Dubai for 1.5 years. Then I moved to Calgary for 2.5 years. Then I moved to California for 1 year. Then I moved back to Toronto for a few years. Then I moved to Mexico. Then I moved to Bali. So I haven't been anywhere long enough to establish a community. Especially, like I said, I think it's very different when you're in alignment versus when you're not. And I was very, very unaligned before. And so I think the network was kind of irrelevant because I wasn't really open to having a network at that time. I didn't trust people. I didn't trust myself. Right. And it's interesting because it's like, that's one of the challenges that I have now is like really this longing for that type of community and that type of network. And like, to have these people that are so close and that you know so well, you have a history with. Because even my close friends here that I do have a history with, they're not here anymore. Right? But here I mean Toronto, that's where I am right now. They're not here anymore. And so I feel like I'm constantly wrestling of like, Toronto doesn't feel like home to me. I don't want to live here permanently. Is Bali that place? I don't know. Sometimes it feels like it is. Sometimes it feels like it drives me crazy. So yeah, I'm not sure. And I don't quite feel settled anywhere yet. And, one day I hope to be, but we'll see.
So when you leave Toronto, which you're leaving soon, right? Where are you headed next?
Yeah. So I'm going to Bermuda for a little bit. I have a good friend.
Oh, another bee. I've been there though.
Another bee. Yeah. And then I'm going to Colombia for about a month. And then I'll be heading back to Bali. So at least that's the plan. We'll see. Plans change quickly in my world.
Right. Okay. So yeah, that's exciting. So now, so you have started this school that you were talking about a few years ago that you just call HD School, right? And it's a very simple name because you teach a simple approach to human design. And that has really resonated with people. I know I've talked to a lot of people who have done your courses and have said how much they love the simple structure that you have. And I've done a lot of your freebie stuff. I have not done your, I've done different things. Yep. So, but do you feel like you have that sense of community, that network in your HD school, or is it more people study on their own and you just jump on calls once in a while? Is there a community aspect to that, or?
Yeah, there is a little bit. I find it funny. I'm always, I absolutely hate having anything on my schedule. Like it's the worst thing in the world to me to have something on my calendar. I tell you why, it just is how I am. So not the worst thing. It's the worst thing if I have an overloaded calendar. So it's like, I really just have a few things a month that are in my calendar. And other than that, I don't like having things scheduled. And so it's always this conundrum of like wanting to connect with students and spend lots of time with them. And we have live calls every month. But out of all the students we have, it's a fairly small group of students that come to the live calls regularly. And I love that because it's like, I love getting to see them. I love getting to hear their questions and to like interact and get to know their charts better and get to know them better. And there was even a point with HG School where I did readings for everybody who joined, and it's just not really possible anymore, which is a beautiful problem to have, but also it makes me sad. I feel like that line four-sided me. It's like, I want to know them. Like I want everybody to just like be here so we can hang out, but also I want everybody to leave me alone and I don't want anything on my calendar. So it's like, you know, the 2-4 conundrum of wanting the connections. And so it's like that. My friend would always joke, it's like, go away, don't leave me, you know?
Right.
And so it's something I'm still trying to figure out of like how to, because I would like there to be more of a connection, even with people in my audience, like, you know, Instagram wise or something. It's like, I would like more connection. But it's tricky. And I think sometimes, the online connection. Well, I don't know. I think sometimes the online connections are really fun and I do enjoy them. Bali makes it a bit difficult time zone wise, but yeah, I do like the community of students that we have there. Not everyone, like I said, is going to participate in the more community aspect. And some people just like to learn at their own pace and do their own thing. And that's, you know, perfect for them if that's what they want. But I do love that because I don't know, it helps me see human design in different ways too, sometimes from the questions that they ask and things that I haven't really thought of before, or in that specific way, or like making connections. Like one of my students the other day was asking about format channels. And she's like, do you think the format channel energy is a little bit similar to manifestor energy in the sense where it's kind of like you blast off when the energy's gone? And I was like, yeah. Like, I think that's a decent analogy for it. I think there's similarities and, you know, there's obviously a lot of differences, but yeah.
Yeah. And format channels, for those who don't know, are the 3 channels from the root that connect to the sacral. And so sometimes the energy's gone because the sacral says no, right? For people who have a sacral, that's part of it.
Yeah.
But it's got a long way to go from the root. You know, those 3 channels have to get through the sacral and the G, or else go some other route that gets up there. So some of them just don't happen, right?
As well.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's interesting. Okay. So I know you talked about screaming before, but let's talk a little bit about manifestor anger in general and how that resonated with you. Because, you know, let's face it, as a woman especially, we're taught that anger is not allowed, right? Yeah. Expressing anger is not allowed. And that's one of my biggest, I hate to say regrets, because I think we all do the best we can with the information we have, or at least I know I do. I can't speak for everyone, but I have a manifestor daughter who's just 23 years old. And her anger used to freak me out. It used to freak me out. And I used to just be like, absolutely not. We do not do that. And she was little, and I used to try to teach. And I'm not proud of some of the ways that I, tried to get her to see that she was out of control instead of really helping her to deal with whatever. And usually the anger came from being stopped, right? Or questioned, or like not being allowed to do what it was, and so, but as women, especially, this idea that you're going to be angry, like in the workplace with a coworker or in a relationship, if you can just tell me how you've experienced and like how your process has maybe changed since you've known.
Yeah. I think it's interesting. I remember when I first learned about that, I didn't resonate with it at all. I was like, anger, weird. Like, I don't get angry. I don't know what that's so strange. Like, I don't ever feel angry, how disconnected I was. And then I remember reading a book not long after I discovered human design that I think it's called The Great Pain Deception. And it spoke about the undercurrent of rage that people often have. And it was talking about sort of perfectionistic types, or like type A people, and how they have this like undercurrent of rage that like they aren't able to do the things that they want to do. The world isn't doing things that they want the world to do. And just this undercurrent of rage that's there. And I was like, that I can relate to, because I'm not really a snappy person. I think, but I definitely do get angry, and I definitely had done a lot of work on learning how to express anger and feel anger. I'm far more comfortable with like just sadness and emotions than I am with anger. But it was a process. And I think like one of the things that drew me to that book was because at the time I had a lot of health issues coming out of my marriage. They went away all basically immediately when I left my marriage. But I was having massive allergy problems. I had really, really bad stomach issues. I had neck issues. I had like kidney problems. I had lots of different issues. And I think it was really me just repressing the anger I felt for the situation I was in, and feeling trapped, and feeling angry at my husband, feeling angry at myself for making the decisions I made. But I didn't know how to express that. And I didn't really feel like there was a point to expressing it, because I had the perspective at the time that I had like made my bed, so I had to lay in it. Instead of, feeling empowered to do something, which also like all that gate 10 energy of like being a victim and like nothing I do makes a difference. So yeah, it's been a process. I think it's interesting. And I think one of the best things that we can do is to understand how to feel the anger and how to process it. And one of my favorite things, I haven't done it for a while. I haven't really felt like I needed to. But I really like the concept of rage journaling, where I think it can be helpful, especially at the beginning of the process, or if you have a suspicion that perhaps you have a lot of anger that's there that you're not expressing, to just kind of like pick a topic. And like, I like to type this out because I find writing is a bit too slow, and anger is like a fast emotion. And so don't worry about spelling or grammar or anything like that. Turn your Wi-Fi off to make sure you're not actually going to send it to someone, and just, just rage. And I find it really helpful. And like, when you think you're done, be like, what else? And then when you think you're done, like, what else? And just get it out. And it's going to take maybe 20 minutes, and then something will shift, and you're just like, oh, okay. Like, even just feel like it's gone. Like the energy has done its thing. It's been felt. I'm also, like I said, a huge fan of screaming into pillows if there's anger, or, having like a thrashing temper tantrum on your bed, or just like pounding pillows or something like that, dancing, shaking it out. Like, I'm a big fan of moving the energy. But I also think I live a very unique life, in the sense that I don't have a lot of triggers for anger in my life. In my last relationship, one of the things, so like after I got divorced, I was with someone for about 5 years. And what would make me like really angry there was just the interruption, which is such a manifestor thing, Mm-hmm. And I remember needing to have a conversation with him at some point. And it's so silly because like I would be, we'd both be at home working during the day, and he would text me like, "Hi, love." And it was just like instant rage. because it's like, what do you want? Like, why are you like, it's not even why are you interrupting me, but now I have to stop. So like the way I feel like it is that like, you're a high speed, I'm a high speed train. You've messaged me this because evidently there's something you need to tell me or talk to me about, but I don't know what it is yet. So now I have to like pull the emergency brake and slam to a stop, be like, hi, what do you want? And it's like, oh, well, I was just wondering, like, how's your day going? And like, what do you want? My day's fine. Like, why are you interrupting me? I wouldn't communicate that way. I would be a little bit more pleasant about it, but that's how I felt at the time. And, oh, I was just wondering about, what do you want to do for dinner tonight? Or I'm having difficulty with this email and I was wondering if you could proofread it. It would be something like that. And so after this happened again and again and again, I was like, we need to have a conversation because when you interrupt me, I need you to tell me in the entirety why you're interrupting me. Because if it's actually important and like urgent, or like time sensitive, let's say, fine, no problem. Like I'm a reasonable person. If it's like, hey, I really need help with this thing. Do you have 5 minutes? Cool, no problem. But the whole stopping and then having to wait for you to reply and then having to like, oh my God, it would literally the rage that it would fill me with because of the interruption. And I'm like, you need to tell me, hi, what are we doing for dinner tonight? Because that's just not that important. So I can like finish what I'm doing. And then when I have an actual break, I can get back to you. But it's like, anyway, so that was just like one of those like funny scenarios where it's like, it really drives me crazy. But yeah, it's like, I just, I'm really lucky to have created a life where I don't have a lot of these scenarios that I bring interruptions or bring anger. There's certainly still anger that comes up. But I also think like I have the gate 15 in my Chiron. And so I think that's a big lesson for me as well, is just having a lot of compassion for people, the whole love of humanity aspect where I certainly understand the extremes that I have within myself. And so I can understand the extremes that other people have. And I can understand that, yeah, okay, this thing's annoying, but it probably is happening for a reason. Like, today, for example, my computer that I just got fixed won't turn on. And instead of raging about that and being angry, it's like, I was planning on spending today working all day. And it's like, okay, well, maybe there's something I need to learn before I finish up these classes. Like maybe the universe is doing this purposely to slow me down because I need something else to come in before I finish this up. And so I have a pretty good element, I would say, of trust at this point as well. Yeah. So I definitely do experience a manifestor anger, but I just don't think I'm that angry of a person as far as manifestors go. But I do think that learning to feel your anger, to process it is like a very important skill for a manifestor.
Right. Yeah. And I love the way Karen Curry Parker teaches about, and probably other people do too, but she teaches that the manifestor anger or the projector bitterness or the generator type frustration, the disappointment for the reflectors are all there as a like a protection for us that shows us, yeah, we're pushing too hard, we're going too fast, we're doing, to stop and look at the way we're proceeding because something's not in alignment, right?
Exactly.
So, yeah. So I find it really helpful to reframe when I start to feel bitter and I start thinking, ooh, where am I, where am I pushing for recognition that, has not, or that sort of thing. So, okay. So now one of my things I always like to talk to people about is when you found out all this stuff about being a manifestor, you've already talked a little bit about it, but just what would you say is the biggest thing or things that you felt like, oh, wow, I thought that was something I was supposed to fix or change. I'm supposed to embrace this. I'm supposed to really live into this. Maybe you saw yourself in the shadow of something that you'd just been trying to wipe out completely, but instead now you've learned to really step into fully. Is there something that comes to mind?
Yeah, definitely. I think the biggest thing for me is consistency. Is I felt like my inconsistency was something that I needed to like fix and needed to figure out how to be consistently like productive and consistently do the things. And I have a lot of extremes in my design. It's like having a 2-4 profile of being like, sometimes you're a hermit, sometimes you're not. being the 1222 channel, like sometimes it's emotional highs and emotional lows for really no reason. Being a manifestor, our energy is not consistent energy. And then, like I said, with the gate 15 as well, I feel like there's something else in right design that gives me the kind of on off, but I can't think of what it is right now. I mean, just the emotional nature as well of emotional energy. But yeah, and so that's really helped me to understand that it's like when I have the energy, use it. When I'm feeling creative, and if I'm feeling inspired and creative and productive, and it's 2 a.m. and I still have gas in the tank, perfect, let's go. Like I'll go until I'm done. And then if I'm not going to work for the next 2 days because I worked 18 hours straight that day, no problem. Like I don't need to force myself to wake up at 7 o'clock the next morning and get work done because I just did 3 days worth of work in one day, and so to really, really respect and trust as well that like, I think there used to be a lot of fear that the energy wouldn't come back, that like, if I didn't force myself to work all the time, that I wouldn't ever be able to work again. And this was something I learned from Karen as well, in terms of the will center, is how the will center does fake rest, because I have the will center defined as well. And so when I was first, like this was when I was still married, like towards the end of my marriage and like the beginning of my divorce period, I used to fantasize about, this is so morbid. I used to fantasize about like falling and smashing my head and going into a coma, just like not like a really bad coma, just like a little coma for like 2 weeks, and I would wake up so rested and so hydrated. Like this is how burnt out and exhausted I was, right? As I was just fantasizing about collapsing and going into a coma. Because I never let myself rest. I was pushing so hard. And listen, starting a business takes a lot of work, absolutely. But I was pushing so hard. And I never really let myself have days off, but I would end up like reluctantly taking a day off because I just wasn't productive. So it would be, 4 p.m. in the afternoon and I still hadn't got anything done. And then I would declare that as being, okay, well, this is a day off. Like, no, it's not, because I'm not resting. I've been fighting myself all day about getting this stuff done. And now that I've decided I'm not going to get anything done, that doesn't count as a day off, or it's like you take a day off and you just do personal development stuff all day, or you clean the house all day, or you run errands all day. Like that's also not downtime. Like that's not rejuvenating. You're not resourcing yourself. Right. So I really think that was like one of the big, big lessons for me in terms of just understanding how my energy works, and that I'm not meant to be consistent, and that I don't need to work every day, and I don't need to show up every day. And like I said, if I want to work for 18 hours one day and don't work for the next week, no problem. Like it all gets done. It's all fine. But it's like, yeah, you just get so conditioned in the world of like how you're supposed to be working instead of paying attention to what actually works for you. So I'm very grateful to human design for that.
Yeah. And, you obviously found human design at a completely different phase in your life. I was already off the roof as a 6th. Yeah. I'd already passed my Chiron return, and, but this whole like not knowing when enough is enough with the open sacral. And I have the same channel that you do that defines my will center. I have the 2644 from the will center to the spleen. And, that's some really like recognizing patterns, but you'd think I'd do something about these patterns I recognize, right? I can see all the time. But what happened is I would recognize the pattern that if I started a project, like for example, I can remember being really into my yard, and I'd go and I'd buy all this stuff and I'd amend the soil and I'd start planting stuff. And now I'm like, oh, I got to get this all mulched, and I got to do, and my husband would be like, honey, do you need a flashlight? Are you going to come in tonight? And I'm like, I'm almost done, because I knew that when I went in and I went to bed the next day, I wouldn't want to get up and do it again because I would be tired. And so instead of being like a normal person and saying, I'll leave this and come back and finish it up tomorrow, I would think, no, if I don't, and this was often what would happen, I would leave something not done, and it would be a week before or 2, or some stuff would die because I didn't get it back out there, because I just didn't have the energy to go back and finish it. And so living my whole life knowing I was that way, there was a lot of shame. And I have this defined will so I could push through and get things done. And when I found out that the gallbladder lives in gate 51, I'm like, well, no wonder I don't have a gallbladder anymore. Right? It's really competitive, initiating energy on getting things done and started or whatever. And I just because you can doesn't mean you should, right? Is the biggest thing I've learned with the open will, the defined will. So, okay, well, it looks like we're already almost at the top of the hour, and it doesn't seem like we have any questions that have come up from anyone. But if anyone does, we'll have one more minute or so. But I wanted to thank you. I really enjoyed meeting you in our chat the other day and chatting now. And if people want to work with you, you don't do readings anymore, right? So it's HD school is the way that people can work with you, or do you have? What if somebody doesn't want to train to become a reader? Do you have resources for those people as well?
Yeah, there's a few different options. I haven't really made them super public yet, but there's an option. I'm changing up the name for this. I think right now what we've settled on is Discover Your Depth. And so basically it's the classes from HD school, but only the ones that pertain to your design. So instead of paying, over $3,000 to learn the entire human design system in HD school, you're paying about $300 to learn just the classes that pertain to you. And then similarly, you can buy your bundle essentially of the gates classes. So if you want to learn your gates specifically, you can just get access to those instead of the same thing of like joining HD school. So it's kind of like you're taking HD school, but only for yourself. So you get to really dive into that. So that's an option for people. Like I said, I don't have it super public. So if you're interested, just send me a message on Instagram or something. And I'm happy to share the details and the links with you there.
Yeah, and if you can put them in the comments, that would be awesome.
Or
and on Instagram, you're sort of spiritual, right?
Yeah, there's periods in between. So period, spiritual. Yeah.
Okay. So hopefully there's not any fakes out there of you yet. Or
there's about 17 of them. Yeah,
about 17. Yeah.
So if anyone messages you selling you a reading pretending to be me, it's not me. But they've died down. I think they were really bad last year, but I haven't had any in a few months now. So hopefully they've moved on.
Yeah, it seems to be a little better. Although I do still get the messages from people once in a while, offering me a reading from random people who I don't even follow. So okay, my throat has been. That winter throat I get.
Mm-hmm.
So, all right. Well, thank you so much, Katie. I really appreciate you taking the time to be here with us, and hopefully you get your laptop stuff straightened out and my phone, the same thing. So, okay. So I want to also thank everybody who joined us, and, whether here or in the replays or later on YouTube. So every week we share stories of how my guests have come to understand themselves in a more loving and empowering way through the lens of human design. How you think and speak about yourself matters. Human design can show you the reframe of not only your own story, but the story you tell yourself about your relationships. If you're ready to start living a better story of who you are, I would love to help guide you through the process and embodying who you came here to be. To work with me, you can set up a discovery call at kathybashanko.com or message me through whatever you're watching this on here. So thanks again, everybody, and have a great day.